Thank you, Robert, for those powerful readings. My mom often used words which, in retrospect, I actually think were not words. Maint. Maint. As in, Danny, you absolutely mayn't throw snowballs at passing cars. Mayn't, may not, a contraction. Google does not confirm the word mayn't. My mother also had another word, which I'm not sure if it was from the Dutch or German or benauwd. Benauwd. And I think it means something like, under the weather or not feeling quite at the top of your game. Benauwd. Benauwd. And I think I certainly am channeling my mom when it comes to the title of the sermon today. Transfigurationalism is not a word, folks. It's not a word. But I use it, in spite of the fact that Google doesn't recognize it, I use it in part to make the Transfiguration story even more confusing. So now you know what you're in for. All of that said, at a very young age, I caught a glimpse of what I think transformation is at least partially about. It was 1965. I was 11. My dad took me to see my first Detroit Tiger baseball game. I was 11, 2.75 hour drive from Holland to Tiger Stadium. I'd never seen it before. We arrived and found our parking, and the stadium sort of rose up from the ground. And I was just speechless, wordless. It was the most magnificent structure I'd ever seen. And the Tigers played there from 1912, I think, to just before the new stadium, which was completed in 2000. Somehow, and I'm a little hesitant to admit this, somehow we got into the stadium incredibly early. And I don't know if my dad bribed a security guard or he unjammed a door, but we were there like 3 hours before anybody else. And we were roaming under the grandstands behind home plate, quite on our own. And the ball players, they practice before they play the game, and they were just getting ready to come on the field to take their batting practices and warm up. And one of the players in full uniform walked toward me as we were just making ourselves at home under the grandstands behind home plate. And the bat was on his shoulder, and he stopped and said to me, "We're going to win one for you, kid." And he walks away, and I turn around, and I see the number on his back. It's number 6. You don't know number 6? That's the point of my whole sermon. It was Al Kaline. Al Kaline said to me, "We're going to win one for you, kid." It was, now I know how Kevin Costner felt in Field of Dreams. "We're going to win one for you, kid." By the way, Al Kaline came into the league in 1955. His rookie year, he was 20 years old, he won the batting title, the American League. It has never been copied. 20 years old, he won the batting title. We're going to win one for you, kid. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't have the capacity, the vocabulary, the language, the insight, but I'm pretty sure I experienced in Tiger Stadium something that was transformational. Sometimes otherworldly and things coming from other realms and the great beyond make their appearance to us in ways we never expect. Celtic spirituality, which passed through Western Europe and really settled in Ireland. In Celtic spirituality, there's an affirmation, heaven and earth are 3 feet apart, but in thin places, they come even closer together. Heaven and earth are 3 feet apart, but in thin places, they come even closer together. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced thin places. Some of you are nodding. Walk into an empty medieval cathedral that's 800, 900, 1,000 years old, and you feel something. You feel something you can't always put into words. I would call that a thin place. Stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon for sunset or sunrise. Hopefully, if there's not thousands of people there, you'll probably feel something similar to a thin place. Lean into the bark of a redwood tree in Northern California, and you'll feel something, probably a thin place. Now, I've shared with you 2 or 3 thin places. Anybody want to share a thin place? In a word, 2 words, short sentence. Have you ever experienced a thin place?
Lake Michigan sunset.
Lake Michigan sunset. A thin place. What? Glenlock, Ireland. Western Ireland? Southern Eastern Ireland. Okay, thin place. Gordon. At the bedside of one who is dying. Jody and I have been in that situation with parishioners countless times. A thin place.
At the bedside of someone being born.
At the bedside of someone being born. The other end of our existence. A thin place. Anybody else? I don't want to cut anybody off. You know, oftentimes poetry puts us in thin places. Here's one entitled, Poem Beginning with Of Course. Of course there are days when the story slowly becomes one we have known before. Quiet, except for the highway humming a mile away while we still sleep within the dream that hasn't yet awakened us. The morning will slip away like the dew on the hostas, ferns, and butterbur. Mid-afternoon will hang its heavy heat on the spider's webs while the cosmos droop their startle of pink upon the bee's bypass. Our ragged cushions sit on the haphazard disassembly of Adirondacks we bought when we wondered if we would stay where time now settles into itself, the 2 of us waiting within what lingers. You want to take a guess of the poet? Jack Riddle. Thank you, Jack Riddle. Sometimes thin places arrive as protests from writers and poets who somehow see with such clarity how the world should be. Like this one, entitled In My Heaven. In my heaven there will be no guns, no more angry or lonely or off their rocker boys or men with guns. And why is it always boys and men wearing trench coats or T-shirts emblazoned with rage who turn an otherwise ordinary innocent day into killing fields? No more breaking news, breaking hearts. No lockdown drills, students learning to drop to the floor out of the line of vision. No bump stocks, no more AK-47s. No need for women to open their purses before they enter the play, the movie, the concert. And no need to fear windows that offer vantage points for taking aim. In my heaven, there will be no one more interested in selling guns than saving lives. No need for politicians who court them. No, in my heaven, we'll melt down, remold our overkill of guns, turn them into plowshares until soil plant seeds of hope and mercy. Thank you, Colette Denoyer. Jesus and his disciples did not dwell in that thin place of transfiguration for very long. They remained on that mystery-enshrouded peak only for a short time, a brief moment. They visited the thin place, but they didn't dwell there. They didn't go up to that mountaintop and dig a condo to live there personally and forever. We traverse to thin places for renewal and retreat and rest and recharging and reassessment in order that we can return from those thin places to what I call thick places. Thick places. Thick places. Thin places lead us to thick places. It's in messy, thick places where we live out what it means to follow that first century rabbi. In thick places. It's in distressed, thick places where we raise up our voices of protest when people are marginalized and demonized and dehumanized for whom they choose to love. Thick places. It's in precariously thick places where we protect those who are the easy targets of an increasingly punitive and reckless government. Thick places. It's in thick places where we strategize and organize and improvise how best to criticize and, if necessary, defy illegitimate directives. In thick places. We get courage and we harness up our conviction from thin places of worship like we do every Sunday, so that in the thick places of Monday morning and beyond we can fashion a world the likes of God has always long intended. Thick places. Thin places lead us to thick places. Jody and I know a colleague, Steve Matheny Vanderwell, who spent most of his ministerial career in Pella, Iowa. And he was always co-pastor. I can't believe it, there's another co-pastor with his spouse, Sophie, for over 20 years. He offered this observation about the current state of things. In the last election, the United States decided that the prime threats to American greatness, are not the climate crisis, not systemic racism, not income inequality. Rather, the prime threats to American greatness are immigrants and park rangers and transgender people. He goes on to write, I won't go into all the tragic stories and statistics about transgender people, family rejection, social scorn, assaults and murders, homelessness and suicide. If anyone seriously believes that a person would go through all this so they can skulk in women's restrooms and have a successful swimming career, they are dismally misinformed and have been callously manipulated. I'm of the notion, and I know Jody would agree, we're of the notion that the sacred book to which we often turn is not an instruction manual or a repository of ironclad certainties. It's a book about encounters. Encounters that include a long line of people who intentionally or incidentally or accidentally run into God and are never again the same. It's a book about encounters. Elijah goes through deep depression. Ruth must leave the country of her birth. Jonah learns from his stubbornness. Paul experiences a life-altering conversion. A teenage Mary is tapped on the shoulder by an angel. What thick places do you imagine? What thick places of transfiguration call out for your attention this week? If you hear such a voice, or maybe it's a nudge, or maybe it's a subtle whisper, or something stronger, I hope you pay attention. I hope you pay attention. There's a saying from the native nation, the Apache nation, wisdom sits in places. Wisdom sits in places. I'm looking at a lot of wisdom sitting in this place. A lot of wisdom sitting in this place. And may you be imbued with much, and I'll say it as a tribute to my mother, may you be imbued with a great amount of transfigurationalism. The world needs more people like you. I invite you to take a few moments to reflect on what you've heard and what your heart is calling you to do.